as we move forward, we want to look at supply chain management. And before I do, I may say the word supply chain. I may say supply chain management. But for now, we're going to look at it as being the same thing. Well, there is a distinction, as we saw earlier. Supply chain are those elements, be it your customer, vendor, suppliers, that constitute those single elements, and the supply chain management portion is basically the coordination of that. But for now, we're just going to refer to it as, again, I may say supply chain management, but I'm referring to the same thing. So let's look at our supply chain model. We'll start with logistics. And basically, our logistics is the complex operation involving many people, facilities of suppliers. So this is kind of the coordination of those elements that are part of the supply chain. So once those are defined, we'll have to come up with a strategy. And our strategy is how do we want to be able to compete in the market? So if you have a product that you want to have a high service level on, you may have your distribution and warehouses closer to your suppliers. If it's something that's web-based, and we've seen how Amazon operates with their fulfillment centers, their strategy is basically developed around that. The next element is supply chain planning, and that's just kind of looking at sitting down and figuring out how we want to achieve our strategy. It's basically planning out those steps that are involved. Supply chain enterprise applications, in our case, is SAP. SAP is well suited to be able to give you that information that's required to have visibility that will allow you to make those decisions. Asset management. This includes the infrastructure that's needed to maintain your supply chain, be it your buildings, warehouses, equipment, your people, and also inventory. So these are the elements that are part of managing the critical items that are needed to meet your supply chain strategy. And of course, you have procurement. This is the buying and selling of products. A lot of times when we say supply chain, we think about the buying process. But as you see, it's just one of the elements within supply chain management. And then product lifecycle management. If you have a product that will have a birth, a midlife, and then a final end, you need to take consideration of that in terms of your planning processes. In the automotive industry, every year they come out with a new model. So those future models are already in the planning stages. So if your products are within that type of mode, then you need to consider that as well. So supply chain management is also the oversight of materials, information, and finances as they move in a process from supplier to manufacturer to wholesaler to retailer to your final customer. So supply chain management involves the coordinating and integrating of these flows both within and among companies. So that within statement is that you'll have supply chains within your own organizations. You'll have to coordinate those, be it production, be it people, be it processes. Your internal supply chain, it will be just as important as your external supply chain. So we'll look at our suppliers, the manufacturers, wholesalers, retailers, consumers. And so that overall oversight is what we're trying to maximize, which makes up our supply chain. Supply chain management practice draws heavily from the areas of industrial engineering, systems engineering, operations management, logistics, information technology, marketing, and strives for an integrated approach. For myself as an industrial engineering, my job was to go out on this was in the tire manufacturing, go out, look at the processes of the tire builder, see in essence how many steps it took him to walk from one station to another station, the time that he interacted with the machines. This was all in an effort to see how we could increase his efficiency. The same with systems engineering, operations management, logistics. we're looking to fine tune these elements that will enable us to get the product out the door faster. So supply chain management is just not the buying and selling of products. It's looking at those things those elements that will help to increase productivity, efficiency, timeliness, reduce the cost of rework. So those are the things that also are important to supply chain management. Supply chain management is also interconnected or interlinked networks, channels, and node businesses combined in the provisioning of products and services required by the end customer in a supply chain. Now, that statement is basically saying a lot, but I go back to SAP in terms of relating to this. We know that SAP gives us the ability to communicate with our vendors, our suppliers, our customers in a way that we interchange information that helps to improve the passage of materials, supplies, and services. So we look at that interconnectedness in terms of being able to meet the customer's needs in a faster way. Now with HANA, one of the main drivers of SA's new HANA products is just the speed. When you work with SAP, there's just a lot of data that's derived from your transactions, customer bases, material bases. So able to improve those interactions, for me, that's one of the reasons where HANA comes into place. Also, cloud computing, just the ability to look at data, be quicker to communicate with your suppliers. That's going to bring efficiency. So this interconnectedness, again, is all about being able to service your end customers. Again, supply chain management as defined as the design, the planning, the execution, control, the monitoring of supply chain activities with the objective of creating net value, building a competitive infrastructure, leveraging worldwide logistics, synchronizing supply with demand, and measuring performance globally. So if you're in business to have a return on investment. Supply chain management, if you look at some of the things that are said about in terms of procurement, the cost of your goods sold. So you want to make sure you have efficiency in that process. You want to be able to have a competitive infrastructure. You want to be able to be fast and nimble to market. You want to be distinguished in terms between your competitors. You want to be able to meet those challenges that occur when something happens. We recently had some storms that came through Texas last year, how that impacted the supply chain. When you have a infrastructure in place, you're able to weather that a little bit better. Worldwide logistics, if you're a global company, you want to be in those markets where you have the advantage of both with your suppliers and your customers to be able to be quick to market. Looking at synchronizing your supply with demand, making sure that you have a good flow of information that determines, at what point should I have more inventory, or what types of products do I need to have in the mix at a particular point. And finally, just measuring the performance globally. So those are other key things in terms of involved with supply chain management. Integrated planning and execution of process required to optimize the flow of materials, information, and financial capital include demand planning, sourcing, production, inventory management and storage, transportation or logistics, return for excess or defective products. Both business strategy and specialized software are used in these endeavors to create a competitive advantage. So this is where we're getting closer to SAP in terms of what SAP does. For demand planning, we have sales and operation planning. Basically, we're taking the customer's demand, translating that into a demand within SAP, if it's in terms of scheduling, production, or going out and sourcing the materials. we're taking the customer's demand. SAP does that very well. The sourcing portion, that is your procurement, that is your buying functionality, again, within the MM module. Production, if you're involved with actually producing a product, SAP, that's the PP module. The inventory management and storage, that's your inventory management and warehouse modules. Transportation and logistics, that again is within SD. And the return for excess or defective products, we have return processes within both sales, SD, and within MM. So SAP has those elements that if you're using the software currently, SAP has all of those things already in place in standard SAP that allows you to perform these. And the issue has always been how to do that. So we're going to get, as we move ahead, we're going to talk more about the actual application of SAP to do that. From our supply chain model that we looked at earlier, there was one of the elements was procurement. And procurement in this case relates to the managing of the flow of goods and services involved with the movement and storage of raw materials, work in process inventory, finished goods from point of origin to the point of consumption. So, as I mentioned, a lot of times when we think of supply chain management, we just think about buying. And it is a major part of the supply chain management, that it is one of the first areas that we actually can see how well we're doing. When I was a purchasing manager, I had the occasion to go to an organization where initially our supply chain was not that robust or strong. I found on one time I had to order a pallet of a work in process from Italy, flew it from Spain to North Carolina at a cost of about $40,000. And this was to meet a production run that for some end product that was going to Mexico. So you quickly see when your supply chain is not operating efficiently. I also had the occasion to actually fill a position of one of my managers who basically was fired because we had product coming from Malaysia. This was when I was in the tire business, of buying natural rubber. And if you think about the process of shipping rubber on vessels, ocean-going liners, you think about the time, as the slide says, point of origin to the point of consumption. In this term, point of origin to our production plant. The signals were such that the demand for our end product was going to be high. And when in actuality there was a downturn, but we kept buying at the level to meet that supposed market uptick. And we incurred millions of dollars of excess rubber. So I was charged with going through and doing an analysis. And as I said, my boss ended up getting fired. So the managing of flow of goods and services is very important within that supply chain model. We began this section of what is supply chain management. We had a very similar model to this. Again, we have supply chain strategy, logistics management, procurement, information management, the planning piece, the asset management. In this case, we've added a couple other elements. We have our suppliers, our manufacturers, warehouses, stores, and customers. So our strategy, again, determines how we want to operate, how we want to compete. The logistics management piece is basically all those things that includes our people, facilities, suppliers. Procurement is our buying function. Information management, in this case, is SAP. SAP has all the modules that encompasses those areas that we need to develop a supply chain. The planning piece is basically, again, the forward-looking way we're going to coordinate our assets to optimize the delivery of goods and services and information. And then we have the suppliers, who are very key, along with the manufacturers, who work with us in order to facilitate our supply chain. Now, the thing about that is, within their own organizations, they have their own supply chain. So when working with vendors and suppliers, you need to have a way to understand exactly what they do. You don't want to be caught having supplier of a key part or product when you have your programs together, have efficient programs, and those vendors and manufacturers can't meet your needs. That involves kind of your vendor programs, where you give your suppliers and vendors a well thought out plan of your future needs. You work with them to help see what's required on their part to be able to meet those. So it's a very, very integrated process. Your warehouses, again, if you want to be fast to market, you'll locate your warehouses and stores in a place where it's close to those end customers, and then your customers themselves. You got to kind of understand what their needs are, kind of be able to plan for whatever their future requirements are. So it's a very integrated process. Again, SAP does not have a button that says create my supply chain. Like a lot of the transactions with SAP, this is information based. SAP has those elements. Thing for you is to go out and basically pull those elements together and maximize the information that SA can provide. As we wrap up this section of what is supply chain management, again, supply chain management is the active management of supply chain activities to maximize customer value and to achieve a sustainable competitive advantage. Our customers are everything in terms of our business. We want to make sure we have the best product at the right place at the right time. Once we have that customer, we want to be able to sustain that and have a competitive advantage against others who are kind of in similar businesses. So supply chain management is one of those elements of a well-run organization that allows us to do that. Our last slide talked of maximizing customer value and sustaining a competitive advantage. If we look at Gartner's Supply Chain Top 20 for 2017, we see some very familiar names. And what is common among these names are a strong presence in the market, a strong ability to react to changes, and strong positioning in their area. So all of that is tied back to supply chain management and their overall business strategy. We look at Apple, Premier Company, Procter & Gamble, Amazon. I can go down the list, but we can see some very familiar names. An end result of having a good business strategy and a good supply chain strategy is, again, maximizing the customer value and having and maintaining a sustainable competitive advantage.